I am 71 years old, and until recently, I thought humiliation came with age the way arthritis does. Gradually, predictably, and mostly in silence. You wake up one morning and realize people have started speaking around you instead of to you. Slower, louder, as if your ears were the first thing to rot. I live in the small bedroom at the back of my daughter's house. It used to be a home office before Ellen got pregnant with her second child. Now it's mine, a twin bed and narrow dresser, a desk with one leg shimmed by a folded church bulletin. The window faces the fence and the neighbor's fig tree, which drops fruit in late August and stains the concrete like old blood. Every morning I wake at 6:10. No alarm. 40 years at the plant trained my body better than any clock ever could. I make my coffee weak now, half a spoon of grounds instead of full one, because my son-in-law, Mark, says caffeine agitate me. He says it the way doctors say things on television. My hands are steady. Always have been, even after Ellen died. She passed 3 years, 2 months, and 9 days ago. Pancreatic cancer. Quick, brutal, efficient. The kind of illness that doesn't give you time to lie to yourself. After the funeral, my daughter said, "Dad, you shouldn't be alone right now." What she meant was, you shouldn't be inconvenienced somewhere else. I sold the house. Or rather, we sold it. That's how it was phrased. The paperwork was already printed when I arrived at the realtor's office. Sale price, $612,000. Proceeds deposited into a joint account for simplicity. Ellen and I had paid off that mortgage in 2009. The same year, we replaced the roof and bought a dishwasher that sounded like a helicopter taking off. I didn't argue. I was tired. Grief makes you agreeable. That was my first mistake. Mark likes dinner to be punctual. 6:30 sharp. He works in consulting, which appears to mean staring at spreadsheets and explaining other people's money to them. He wears fitted shirts and expensive watches and smells faintly of citrus and impatience. That night we had chicken thighs, overcooked, skin rubbery, boxed mashed potatoes, and green beans from a can. The children ate in front of the television. Ellen, my daughter Ellen, not my wife, sat scrolling through her phone, nodding at things Mark said, without really listening. I asked for more salt. Mark sighed. "Dad, your blood pressure. I had it checked last month." He smiled the way men smile when they are correcting a child. "That's what you remember." There it was, casual, surgical. Later, when his sister and her husband came by, wine, laughter, noise filling the dining room, I told story, an old one, about the blackout in '97, when half the city went dark, and I stayed at the plant for 36 hours straight. I told it before. I knew that. Halfway through, Mark interrupted. "Sorry," he said, laughing. "He's been a bit senile lately. He loops." The word landed on the table between the wine bottle and the bread basket. "Senile." No one corrected him. I looked at Ellen. She avoided my eyes. Her sister coughed and reached for her glass. Someone changed the subject to flights. How expensive tickets were now. How lucky they were to have bought theirs early. $4,200 for a family of 4 to Orlando. Charged, I later learned, to the same joint account that held the money for my house. I smiled. I chewed my chicken. I nodded when spoken to. Inside, something shifted. Not snapped, not broke. Shifted, like a gear finally engaging after years of grinding. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the house breathe. Pipes clicking. The refrigerator humming. Mark's footsteps upstairs, heavy, confident. I thought of Ellen, my wife, counting receipts at the kitchen table. Glasses sliding down her nose. "You always check," she used to say. "Not because you don't trust. Because numbers tell the truth when people don't." The next morning, I found the old recorder in my desk drawer. A cheap black thing I'd used once to dictate notes after a minor surgery years ago. I replaced the batteries, and I started listening. I did not confront anyone right away. That surprised me about myself. You'd think a man who had run turbines the size of houses, who had signed off on budgets with more zeros than cents, would slam his fist on the table and demand respect. But age doesn't make you brave. It makes you cautious. It teaches you how expensive a single wrong word can be. Instead, I watched. I listened, and I counted. The joint account sat there quietly, like a well-trained dog. I hadn't logged into it myself in months. Ellen, my daughter, said she handled the online stuff because the bank's interface was confusing. She said it kindly. The way you tell someone they shouldn't drive at night anymore. The password came back to me on the second try. Ellen's birthday. Of course. The balance made my throat tighten. $184,220.17. 3 years earlier, after the house sold, it had been $612,000, minus closing costs. Even accounting for living expenses, utilities, groceries, property tax on this house, not mine, there should have been more, much more. I opened the transaction history. At first glance, it looked harmless, normal, like any family account. Then I started reading it the way Ellen, my wife, had taught me. Slowly, line by line. $9,870. Delta Airlines, March 14th. $6,300. Marriott Bonvoy, March 16th. $14,500. Chase mortgage payment. Recurring. That one stopped me. Mortgage. Mark and Ellen owned this house, but they'd refinanced twice since buying it. I remembered signing something temporary after Ellen died, power of attorney. They'd said, just in case. I hadn't realized how flexible just in case could become. I scrolled. $3,200. Reimbursement. Mark H. $1,850. Consulting expenses. $4,400. American Express payment. I clicked the Amex line. 3 charges popped up immediately. A watch. A hotel. A steakhouse I'd never set foot in. Total. $4,392.18. I closed the laptop and sat there for a while. The house was quiet except for the dishwasher. It rattled the same way the one Ellen and I bought in 2009 used to, before I replaced the pump myself. No one repairs things anymore. They replace them. People too. That afternoon, Mark came home early. I was in the living room, reading the paper, an actual paper, ink on my fingers, stubborn habit. He stood over me. Did you pay the utilities yet? Yes. Make sure you didn't double pay again, he said lightly. Last time was a mess. I looked up at him. I don't remember double paying. He smiled. Again, that doctor smile. Exactly. The recorder stayed in my pocket after that. It wasn't dramatic. No spy games. No hidden panels. Just a small red light and patience. I recorded conversations about money that weren't meant for me. Dad doesn't really track this stuff anymore, Ellen said one morning on the phone. He'd forget his own birthday if we didn't remind him, Mark replied. I recorded the sound of them laughing. I recorded the day Mark said, once we move the remaining funds into the investment account, it'll be cleaner. Cleaner than what? I wondered. I started printing statements at the library. 20 cents a page. The librarian recognized me after the third visit and stopped asking questions. At home, I kept the papers in an old manila folder labeled tax, 2011. No one touched it. No one ever touches old tax folders. They're the graveyards of paperwork. The numbers formed patterns. Monthly transfers. Predictable. Smooth. In 3 years, Mark had paid $176,000 toward his mortgage for my money. Flights, hotels, private school fees, a $58,000 SUV down payment. Total by my count, $423,000. I slept badly those nights. Not from fear, from clarity. There is a particular kind of anger that doesn't burn hot. It settles. It organizes. It makes lists. The dinner that followed was unremarkable. Pasta, oversalted, store-bought sauce. Mark complained about his day. Ellen nodded. The kids argued about screen time. At one point, Mark said, "Dad, you left the porch light on all day again." I was reading. He shook his head. "You really shouldn't live alone." I looked at my plate. That night, I labeled a second folder, Audio Family, and I waited. Because when people think you're finished, they speak freely. And when they speak freely, they tell you exactly who they are. There is a moment before a storm when the air goes flat. You don't notice it unless you've lived long enough to recognize patterns. Machines before they fail, people before they lie. That Sunday afternoon had that kind of stillness. Too neat, too rehearsed. Ellen said we were having a proper family dinner. Mark said it would be good for Dad. Those two phrases should never appear in the same sentence. They set the table with the good plates, not the wedding china. Those stayed boxed in the garage. But the heavier white ones with the blue rim, the ones that chipped easily. Ellen cooked pot roast in the slow cooker. Carrots soft to the point of surrender. Potatoes falling apart when you touch them with a fork. The smell filled the house. By 3. Mark opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving. He announced the price without being asked. $80, he said, pouring generously for himself and Ellen's sister. Worth it. I drank water. Ice clinking. 1 cube too many. Mark noticed. Careful, he said. You don't want to spill. I smiled. The children were sent upstairs with their tablets. Adults only. That was new. I noted it. We sat. Fork scraped. Glasses clinked. Someone complimented the meat. Ellen looked relieved. She always looked relieved when nothing went wrong yet. Mark cleared his throat. So, he said, leaning back in his chair, hands folded like a man about to teach a lesson. We should probably talk about the future. There it was. I kept chewing. He continued. Dad, we've noticed you've been struggling a bit. Little things. Forgetting payments. Repeating stories. Ellen nodded too quickly. It's normal, she said. At your age. I dabbed my mouth with my napkin. Folded it once. Careful. Mark went on, encouraged by the silence. We just want to make sure everything's handled responsibly. So there aren't issues later. What kind of issues? I asked. He blinked. The question surprised him. Well, he said slowly. Confusion? Legal complications. People taking advantage of you. I almost laughed at that. Instead, I said, who would do that? Ellen shifted in her seat. Mark smiled again. That same calm, professional smile. That's exactly why it's better if we manage things. You've been lucky to have us. Lucky? The word sat there, smug and self-satisfied. I reached into my pocket. Mark stopped mid-sentence. What's that? My hearer, I said. It's not what it used to be. That was a lie. But people like lies that flatter their assumptions. I placed a recorder on the table. Small, black, unremarkable. What's this? Ellen asked. A recording, I said. Mark laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, come on, Dad. This isn't healthy. I pressed play. At first there was static. The hum of the house. Then Mark's voice, clear, confident, unmistakable. He doesn't really understand the account anymore. It's easier this way. If we wait too long, it gets messy. Judges don't like senile clients. He won't fight it. He doesn't even notice. Silence swallowed the room. The roast cooled. The wine breathed. Somewhere upstairs, a child laughed at a video. Ellen's face drained of color. Mark's smile didn't disappear immediately. It froze, like a mask that hadn't been told the performance was over. That's out of context, he said finally. I nodded. There's more. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I pressed play again. Numbers followed. Dates. Transfers. His voice explaining casually how much longer it would take before everything was clean. When the recording stopped, I reached for my fork. Pot roast good, I said. A bit salty. No one moved. Mark stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. You recorded us? He said. Yes. That's illegal. I checked, I replied. One-party consent. Ellen started to cry. Quietly. The way she used to, as a child when she knew she was caught, but hoped sadness might fix it. Mark pointed at me. This proves nothing. I met his eyes. It proves you called me senile, I said, and that you planned accordingly. The table was still full, but the dinner was over, and for the first time in years, I wasn't the one being managed. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. The house did not explode into shouting the way movies promise. It sagged instead. Mark stood there, one hand on the back of his chair, breathing through his nose like a man counting to 10 and failing. Ellen stared at the tablecloth as if it had personally betrayed her. No one reached for the wine. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. I'll be in my room, I said. We can continue this tomorrow. Mark laughed, sharp and humorless. You think this just ends? I looked at him, really looked. The expensive watch, the carefully neutral shirt, the man who had built his confidence on the assumption that I was finished. No, I said. I think this starts. The first letter arrived 3 days later. Registered mail. Thick envelope. Mark's handwriting on the return address. Tight and slanted, like he was gripping the pen too hard. Inside, a notice from a law firm I'd never heard of explaining in clean, polite language the due to concerns regarding cognitive decline. They were recommending an evaluation. Temporary financial guardianship. For my protection. I laughed when I read it. A dry laugh. The kind you hear at funerals. I called the number at the bottom of the page. The receptionist put me on hold immediately. Piano music. Something cheerful. I waited. When the lawyer finally came on, I asked one question. Did you listen to the recording? Silence. Then, Mr. Harris, we act on information provided by our clients. Good, I said, because I have more information, and I will be providing it to the court. The line went dead shortly after. I didn't sleep much that week. Not from fear, from preparation. I visited the bank in person. Not the branch Ellen liked, the one with the glass walls and smiling posters, but the older one downtown, where the counters were scuffed and the tellers had been there long enough to remember names. The manager was younger than my socks, but polite. I need a full audit of the joint account, I said, and copies of every authorization signed in the last 3 years. He hesitated. I also need to revoke power of attorney, I added, sliding a folder across the desk. He opened it. Receipts, statements, transcripts, audio timestamps printed and cross-referenced. My handwriting in the margins. Neat. Legible. His eyebrows climbed slowly. This will take some time, he said. I have it, I replied. Mark, try charm next. He knocked on my door that evening, voice softer, slower. Dad, this is getting out of hand. I didn't open the door. We were just trying to help. You know how things look. Your age. The confusion. The confusion, I said through the wood, is why you spent $423,000 of my money. Silence. And quieter. We were going to pay it back. I opened the door. When I asked, he didn't answer. That's when I saw it, the flicker. Not guilt. Fear. The sudden realization that I was still counting. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Small courtroom. Beige walls. Fluorescent lights buzzing faintly like tired insects. Ellen sat 2 rows behind Mark. Eyes red. Hands clenched in her lap. He wore his best suit. I wore the same jacket I'd worn to Ellen's funeral. The pocket still smelled faintly of her perfume. When the judge asked if I understood why I was there, I stood. Yes, I said, because my son-in-law assumed I wouldn't. I handed over the recordings, the transcripts, the numbers. I watched Mark's lawyer skim, then slow, then stop pretending. The judge removed his glasses. Mr. Harris, he said to me, how long did you work in operations? 41 years. And these records? I kept them. The judge nodded once. Guardianship denied. Accounts frozen. Independent forensic audit ordered. Mark didn't look at me when it ended. Ellen did. She looked smaller than I remembered. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table. Same table, same chair, same house, but the air had changed. The silence no longer felt like something done to me. It felt earned. The numbers were finally speaking, and for the first time in years, everyone else had to listen. Justice, when it finally arrives, is quieter than people expect. There was no apology dinner, no dramatic confession, no cinematic collapse where Mark admitted everything and begged forgiveness while rain streaked the windows. What happened instead was paperwork. A lot of it. The forensic audit took 11 weeks. 11 weeks of envelopes, certified mail, phone calls scheduled 3 days out. The auditor was a woman in her late 40s with rectangular glasses and a voice that never rose or fell. She spoke in totals, not feelings. Her report came bound in gray cardstock. Misappropriated funds. $431,870. Improper mortgage payments. $176,000. Personal expenses charged without authorization. $112,400. Educational expenses. Minor children $38,900. Travel and leisure. $61,200. She slid it across the table toward me. This is extensive, she said. Yes, I replied. It added up. Mark was removed from the account the same afternoon. The money didn't come back all at once. That's not how real life works. The court ordered repayment. Liens were placed. A refinancing fell through. Then another. Suddenly Mark's confidence, so carefully tailored, had nothing to hang on. He moved out 3 months later. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just boxes. Ellen, my daughter, stood in the driveway watching him load them into a rented truck. The children were at school. It was a Tuesday, garbage day. The bins were already at the curb, lids open like mouths. She didn't cry when he left. She cried that night in the kitchen, sitting on the floor with her back against the cabinet. "I didn't think he meant it like that," she said. "Like what?" I asked. Like you were already gone." I didn't answer. Some realizations arrived too late to be useful. 6 months after the hearing, I moved. Not far. 12 miles. A small one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The smell of bread in the mornings. Radiators that hissed like they were alive. A balcony barely big enough for a chair. And a mug of coffee. I bought outright. $287,000. No joint account. No for simplicity. Just my name. The rest of the money went where Ellen, my wife, would have wanted it. Conservative funds, clean lines, nothing clever. On moving day, Ellen, my daughter, helped carry boxes. She was careful with them, overly careful, like I might break if she moved too fast. At one point, she picked up the old manila folder. "Do you still need this?" she asked. I took it from her. "Yes," I said. "It reminds me." She nodded. Mark called once, 3 months after the repayment order. His voice was different, thinner, less sure. "I never thought you'd go this far," he said. I looked out at the balcony, at the pigeons fighting over crumbs, at the city moving on without either of us. "You called me senile," I said, in front of everyone. There was a pause. "You could have talked to me." "So could you," I replied. I hung up, and my days are small again. I walk to the market. I cook for one. I read in the evenings with a lamp that flickers if you touch the cord just right. I still wake up at 6:10. Some nights I miss the noise, the children running, the sense of being needed, even if it was counterfeit. But I don't miss being managed. People talk about dignity as if it's something you lose slowly. They're wrong. It goes all at once. And if you're lucky, if you pay attention, if you keep records, if you stay quiet long enough, you can take it back just as suddenly. Mark thought I was finished. He was wrong. I was only done being silent.